Hey everyone, welcome back to the Npte podcast. This is Will Crane, your host. Thank you so much for joining me as we go through the content you need in order to dominate on test day. As we get started here today, let me just start with a big thank you. Thank you for what you do. I know that as you go through this whole process, I know it's painful. I know there's a lot going on in your life right now. You're probably listening to this either on your way to school, on your way home from school, on your way to clinical, on your way home from clinical, while you're out on a run, maybe you're traveling somewhere. Let me just say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to spend with me, letting me be a part of your journey as you head towards the Npte so you can absolutely dominate on test day. So there's so many inspiring stories as I think about folks that I've known over the years. I mean, certainly several come right to mind. Like I've had multiple students who have passed on their 6th attempt with just, they're just right at their wits' end trying to figure out how to pass this exam. I've had folks who have gone through what we would consider non-traditional life circumstances. I had one woman, she had to pass the exam in order to gain custody of her children again. Like there's just so many things that are just stories that are on the one hand heart-wrenching as you consider the challenges that they've overcome. On the other hand, just such a surge of joy when I see people cross that finish line. And let me tell you, there's nothing better than seeing people succeed and knowing that you were a part of the success, part of that journey. Now, understandably so, it is definitely a difficult process, and it's fun to be able to help people out. And I think that's why we come into the physical therapy profession, is because we truly enjoy that aspect of care. And I feel like that's something that I get a front row seat to as I consider and think back to all the people that I've helped pass the Npte. And so let me just say thank you to you. Hope you're having a fabulous day, and I really do appreciate you coming and spending time with me. So I've got a practice question here for you today. This is related to the integumentary system. So on test day, there's not a ton of questions on Integ, but they're enough to keep your eye on it. I mean, somewhere between 8 and 11 questions related to Integ. So definitely a section worth spending some time on. As I always say, you'll want to spend the time proportionally in each of the sections, with integumentary being certainly on that list. So today is about interventions. I specifically wanted to talk about some of the dressings and dressing management, particularly one that's a little bit plaguey for students. I know it was plaguey for me, and I want to make sure that we talk about it. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into our practice question. I will read you the question, give you a moment to respond, and then we will talk about it together. Here we go. Which of the following wound types will most likely benefit from the use of a hydrogel dressing? So which of the following wound types will most likely benefit from the use of a hydrogel dressing? So 1, infected wound, 2, thermal burn, 3, venous insufficiency ulcer, and 4, wounds that bleed easily. So the question again, which of the following wound types will most likely benefit from the use of a hydrogel dressing? 1, infected wound, 2, thermal burn, 3, venous insufficiency ulcer, and 4, wounds that easily bleed. Well, as you consider on the characteristics of a hydrogel dressing, you'll note that hydrogels are mostly water. It's a glycerin-water composition, where the big advantage is that they are very moisture retentive and actually can provide moisture to a dry wound. One of their big drawbacks is they have very little absorptive capability. So all things considered, it has extremely poor absorption, so it would not be used on anything that had moderate to maximal exudate. So certainly anything like an infected wound. Infected wounds typically have pretty significant amounts of exudate. Also, the trouble with an infected wound is that if you were to retain moisture into the wound, it probably would only exacerbate the infection. The correct answer here is a thermal burn. So a thermal burn, whether it be really any type of burn, radiation burn, thermal burn, skin tears, other minimally exudating wounds, these are all most likely to use a hydrogel dressing. Now, because the hydrogels are mostly water, they'll actually feel quite nice to the patient, at least as nice as a wound dressing can feel, because they'll have a cooling capability that is very helpful for burns or burn wounds. So definitely on the list that could be used there. They also do provide a small amount of absorptive capability. They do permit some moisture to travel through them, so a lot of times you'll have a secondary dressing on top. They're not appropriate for bleeding or infected wounds just because they, again, very poor absorptive capability, and they're slow at absorbing it too, so therefore it would tend to be very moisture retentive. Venous insufficiency ulcers, these likely need a dressing with very high absorptive capabilities because of their high amounts of exudate. And obviously, wounds that bleed easily, you'll probably have something like, a lot of times post-surgically, you'll have petrolatum impregnated gauzes. So they're used in contact with the wound in order to stop the bleeding, but also can be removed easily without trauma to the granular tissue underneath. So all that to say that hydrogel dressings are really good for dry wounds. So something with very, very little exudate. And they're especially ideal for burns. So radiation and thermal burns, but also skin tears. You could probably put arterial wounds on the list here because they tend to be quite dry. One of the disadvantages of hydrogels is that because they're so moisture retentive, you can actually get maceration of the skin. So if the skin can get a little bit too moist and pruny on the edges, and so you have to be cautious of that. So you try to get it to the right size so you don't get the skin too macerated on the sides. All right, so there you go. There's your practice question. Kind of a short and sweet one about which wound type is best for the use of a hydrogel. And the correct answer here is that thermal burn, or really any type of burn. It's really quite ideal for that. All right, so with that, we'll bring today to a conclusion. If you haven't yet, be sure to check out ptfinalexam.com for all of our course offerings. I think you'll love the clear, compassionate way that we help people get through the exam. It's a ton of fun. It's great to be able to go through the content in a way that's not only going to help you with practice questions, but also help you as a PT down the road. If you haven't yet, be sure to leave us a like over wherever it is you listen to this podcast, whether it be on YouTube, Google Play, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, wherever it is you're listening to this. It always helps so much in the algorithms. It only takes like 1 second to go in there and click with your thumb. So give us a like over there. That'd be very, very helpful. And in the meantime, take good care of yourselves. Will Crane fist pumps all around, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.